Behold, a gateway to your own past, if you wish.
History's strange, it's alien, and it won't give us what we would like to have.
Gatto's Tire and Auto Service bringing you Hour 3 of Bill Mick Live on this Tuesday morning. It is the 20th of June, 2023, better known as West Virginia Day. Good to have you along for that. And if it is a Tuesday and it's 8 o'clock, it's time for Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. Dave Bowman joins us from Silverdale, Washington, and we're going to look at a at least formerly favored founding father. Say that 5 times fast, Dave Bowman.
No.
Morning, buddy. How are things in Silverdale?
Really good. We could spend some time on West Virginia, but I've got something else prepped, so I guess we should do that.
Yeah,
right?
now that you're ready, you go right ahead. That's okay. I understand you not having that holiday at the front of your. My son Tyler's birthday is tomorrow. I was so wanting him to be born on the 20th instead of the 21st, but he's here. Glad he is. You know,
I tried to get Ben to be born on the 4th. Took Cammie out for a real rough ride in the car, and so we should have some pizza and beer. Didn't work.
There you go.
I tried.
Never mind that whole fetal alcohol syndrome thing.
Yeah. You said there that he was a formerly favored founding father, Alexander Hamilton. I don't know if it's former or not. I think based on popular culture, Alexander Hamilton might be the only founder father that people actually remember. And they do so based solely upon a musical, which is, what's the word for it? Questionable at best when it comes to history. I mean, there's some things that actually happened
and it appropriated founders' culture. Come on.
Right. Yeah.
Let's be honest here.
You could go that route. Now, in fairness, I've never actually seen the musical. I've never seen it from beginning to end. I've seen bits and pieces of it here and there.
Yeah, me too.
I had an opportunity to go to it once upon a time, but something else came up and I wasn't able to go. But Hamilton is one of those guys that he had outsized influence, and even to this day, we talk about the 2 models of constitutional interpretation, the Jeffersonian model and the Hamiltonian model. And while we don't have time to get into that today, the Hamiltonian model is the one that won out in the end. Even Jefferson kind of converted to the Hamiltonian interpretation of the Constitution. But when you talk about these framers, I go back to what I said last week with the whole Tea Party thing. We need to get back to the values and the ideas of the framers. And I always ask that question, well, which framer? Because they all had much different ideas about what should happen. And the musical... Are
you surprised they were able to meld it into one final document? Was that surprising to you at all?
It's not surprising in the broader sense. I mean, these were people who were used to working together. I mean, they cobbled together the Articles of Confederation. For God's sakes, Bill, they cobbled together the American Revolution, which,
True.
But as I said last week, this couldn't be done today because they don't have the singularity of purpose which the framers and the founders had. The framers particularly had the idea that they had to be united, unite or die. And we don't have that today. We don't have that. There's no single unifying issue in the country today as there was both in 1775 and later in 1787.
You're discounting the LGBT agenda, Dave.
Well, I don't think that unites us.
No, okay. Maybe not.
Just out on a limb here. But the musical has caused Hamilton to be the best known framer. But I wonder why often, because Alexander Hamilton, as you're about to learn, one of the guys that actually pushes to be part of, he wants this convention. He's one of the people that really pushes to have this convention. He expects to be a leader in it. He expects to be one of the most outspoken people. He expects people to listen to him.
And his goal at the end of this, as he's pushing it, is what? Come out with a constitution for this new country.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. He wants a new government, but it isn't the government that people at the Tea Party stand around and go, we need to get back to the values of the framers and the ideas of the framers. In fact, his ideas are so bad that the Constitutional Convention of 1787 virtually ruins his life. And oddly enough, it's not covered in the musical. I wonder why.
Exactly. We continue with Dave Bowman, and Dave Does History in just a minute on Bill Mick Live. Have you heard? Tropical Storm Brett is out there. And there's another disturbance behind Brett. That one will be Cindy. It is hurricane season. We're early in it, thank goodness, and that gives you plenty of time to get ready for the storm with O'Galley Electric. You know, Chris and the staff there at O'Galley Electric, helping you protect your home with a Generac home standby generator. And if you buy that generator now, you get a free extended 10-year warranty, a free mobile link accessory that helps you manage and understand what's going on with that generator remotely. So a lot of advantages there. And take advantage of that. Call O'Galley Electric at 321-425-3343. Terms and conditions apply. You can also see them at eg-electric.com. Nothing more important in hurricane season than protecting your home, protecting your loved ones, and being able to do that with a Generac home standby generator from O'Galley Electric. Appreciate their sponsorship here on Bill Mick Live. Dave Bowman with us. Dave Does History. Dave, so Alexander Hamilton is charged up about this, but how does he ruin his reputation in the process?
Well, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back a week and just kind of remind people where we are. We've got two plans on the table, the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. Madison is the genius behind the Virginia plan, which ultimately is mostly what we're going to go with. But right now, that's not clear. The problem with Madison's plan is that it denies equal suffrage to the small states, and they are not having this. It seems quaint to us today. We don't really understand this argument. But in 1787, the idea of denying a state its sovereignty was unthinkable. And yet this is what the Virginia plan essentially does. And the problem that the small states are having is that Connecticut, which is a small state, keeps joining with the big states. Connecticut and New York keep joining with the big states. New York, by the way, not a big state, to push this plan. The New Jersey plan that the small states have put forward is problematic because it can't be passed. It requires Rhode Island to help approve it, and Rhode Island's not even there. So legally, they can't approve this plan. So we're back to the Virginia plan again, but the argument is still going on. And again, I don't think that we comprehend today. You know, the closest I can come to it,
the only thing we have is the Electoral College that would give us some semblance of understanding this, right?
To a degree. I think a better way to look at it today is how urban areas dominate rural areas, which was never really intended to happen. But for example, in California, you know, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego run the state. Here in Washington, Seattle and Tacoma essentially have enough voters that they overrule the rest of the state. Mm-hmm. And this is the same way that the smaller states were looking at the Virginia plan is if you do everything based on population, you're going to rule everything and we're not going to be worth anything. These two plans are on the table. They're being bitterly debated, but the Virginia plan is carrying the day because New York and Connecticut keep going along with the big states for reasons that don't make any sense. Nobody can figure out why. Hamilton is sitting there, and he is getting madder and madder and madder by the moment. I mean, he is just, I can't even begin to express to you how much he hates both of these plans. He thinks that both of these plans are horrifying. The New Jersey plan's not going to work because it's the same that we're already doing, and that's not working. So we can basically get rid of that one. But this Virginia plan, in Hamilton's eyes, has a huge hole in it. And that hole is that it gives too much power Now, again, all you Tea Party people that want the values and the ideas of the framers, Madison's belief is that the Virginia plan is too much democracy, gives too much power to the people, and he does not like that at all. Now, that said, he's not really that far off from what most of the people there think. Most of the people there are not that comfortable with the idea of democracy. They don't like they don't like the ideas of democracy because they think that it will become excessive and they think it will lead to problems. But Hamilton is the only one who's willing to actually stand up and say that out loud. Now, he assumes that everything is confidential, but of course we already know that Franklin and others are leaking to the local papers about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a problem for him because it's going to get out into the newspapers that Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, Colonel Hamilton, General Washington's aide-de-camp, a military hero at Yorktown, doesn't think all that much of the people, the privates and the corporals and the sergeants that served under him. He doesn't think that they deserve to have any say in this government. He thinks that's a really bad idea. And the thing that Hamilton does this week, in fact, he did it on June 19th of 1787, which was a Monday, by the way, and a very hot Monday in Philadelphia. The mistake Hamilton makes that will haunt him till the day he dies at the Bullet from Aaron Burr is that instead of just thinking those things, he actually gets up on Monday, June 19th, 1787, so far the hottest day of the year, and in that stuffy, smelly room for 5.5 hours, he says it out loud over and over again.
And we'll talk more of that, get the details with Dave Bowman. Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
Bowman joins Bill for our weekly look at the past. We're kind of hoping to learn something new, or at least have some fun, It's Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
In an hour that's brought to you by Gatto's Tire and Auto Service. Dave, I'm wondering if this music's one of the intros to the songs in the musical Hamilton. It just sounds a little upbeat. Positive.
Because of the way the board is set up, I can't hear it anymore. So
I know you can't. Yeah. So that's just how it all works. Nonetheless, we're talking Alexander Hamilton. And so he gets up for this 5.5 hour speech on a Monday in June. That's the hottest day of the year in Philadelphia.
Can you imagine listening to anybody for 5.5 hours?
Not without lunch and bathroom breaks.
Well,
no.
I'm sure they took those, but at the same time, 5.5 hours in a hot room. I lecture pastors all the time. I tell pastors all the time, 20 minutes, man. That's it. At the end of 20 minutes, you're done. You go longer than that.
It's interesting because at church yesterday, your commentary about pastors and length of sermon came to mind, and I put a clock on my pastor. And it was actually about 20 minutes. He didn't do bad, but some of the and look, I enjoy the music in church for the most part. Some of the more modern stuff, I think it all sounds like the same song repeated over and over again, but that's another story. And I enjoy the time spent with friends there, right? But if you got a 20-minute sermon, you don't need an hour and a half service. Just saying. Yeah. Anyway, we digress.
Yes, we do. But what else is new? So Alexander Hamilton is part of the New York delegation. Now, the way this works is each state sends however many representatives they want to send. But each state only gets one vote. So the delegation votes amongst itself, and that then carries the state's vote. So New York has 3 delegates. Alexander Hamilton is one because he's Alexander Hamilton. He is Washington's right-hand man. He is a colonel. He is a scholar. He's a lawyer. He's a military hero. The people of this nation love Alexander Hamilton in 1787. He is right up there with Washington. I mean, it's important for us to understand the esteem with which he is held around the nation. There's nobody in the country who doesn't know who Alexander Hamilton is because he represents everything that's possible in America. Like the musical will teach you, he comes to America as a 17-year-old, orphan, basically, bootstraps himself up, becomes very successful, and he spends most of the American Revolutionary War as Washington's aide-de-camp. He becomes very close friends with Washington. Washington relies on him, but he's chafing at this. He wants a military command. And it isn't until the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, 6-8 years after the war starts, that Washington finally relents and gives him a battlefield command at Yorktown. And he just does a bang-up job. I mean, he does a great job, and he becomes a military hero on top of everything else now. It's important to understand that when Hamilton speaks, people listen because he's considered one of the leaders in America.
So he's anti-monarchy. He wants America's freedom. He wants to have a new government here.
He's anti-King George.
Okay.
But don't get too far out over your skis over this anti-monarchical thing.
Really?
Because remember, he's Washington's best friend. Or at least he considers Washington his best friend.
Okay.
He is part of the New York delegation, like I said, which is 3 people, which means that any 2 of them voting carry the state. And as I said earlier, New York keeps voting, even though it's a small state, remember this is based on population, keeps voting with the large states, which doesn't seem to be very Hamiltonian-esque, does it?
No. Is it because of the economy in New York being big in spite of size?
Oh, New York has the best economy in the entire United States, and it's all because of one man who, by the way, sent the other 2 guys to New York, and they don't really like Hamilton all that much.
Our hour being brought to you by Gatto's Tire and Auto Service. I've trusted Gatto's for years. They've been in Brevard far longer than that. Well over 50 years, Gatto's has been serving this community with quality maintenance, repairs, tires for your vehicle. 3 generations of the Gatto's family having done that thus far, and it continues now with 6 locations across the Brevard. I appreciate Gatto's. I know when I go into the shop, I use the one right across the street from our studios here. It's clean, it's well managed, it's well maintained. They have employees who aren't trying to force a sale on you. They're telling you what's going on with your vehicle and giving you the honest recommendations for what you can stretch out a little longer, what you're going to need to do before too long, or something that needs done right now. That's why for me, I've got to go to Gatto's. Would be a good call for you as well. Appreciate them bringing you this hour of Bill Mick Live. Back with Dave Bowman and Dave Does History. So Hamilton's a minority of 1 in a 3-member delegation from New York to this convention.
And this is frustrating to him because he expected to be a leader in this convention. And so far, he's lost every vote. He's lost every conversation, every argument. And the reason he keeps losing is because the other 2 New York representatives, 2 guys by the name of John Lansing and Robert Yates. Now, these 2 guys have been very close friends since they were roommates in college. Okay? If I were a revisionist historian, and I'm not, but if I were, being as it's Pride Month, I'd probably write an article about the fact that they were probably gay. They weren't, but, in honor of Pride Month, I'd throw that in there.
It's obligatory for June. Right. Yeah, I got you.
What these guys really are is they are very close allies of New York Governor George Clinton. Now, George Clinton...
Is he the one that sent them?
Yes. He's the one that decided that they were going, and he had to send Hamilton because he's Hamilton. Now, New York's economy is just going gangbusters, and it's all because of Clinton's policies. It's all because Clinton is really an economic genius. Clinton will actually go on to become vice president of the United States eventually. But you need to understand that George Clinton is the man. He is the guy for whom the term anti-federalist is ultimately invented. He will be the leader of, the main spokesman for, and in fact, the most vehement anti-federalist in the entire country. And he has sent two of his guys to this convention to essentially keep it from becoming anything other than a revision of the Articles of Confederation, because New York is doing great, and we don't want to give up that sovereignty. If we give up that sovereignty into a national government, it might screw up New York, and we can't have that. Mm-hmm. And so he sends these two to counter everything that Hamilton wants. And Hamilton is getting ticked off. He is
looking back at this
angry.
In fairness, he's trying to take care of the people of New York and himself, I'm
Clinton
sure.
Is, yes. Clinton is what today we would call a libertarian, a 10th Amendment libertarian. But at the time, that's seen as very, well, it's seen as anti-federalist. They invent the term anti-federalist for him, but it's not all that unusual either. Most of the small states feel this way, but New York is kind of doing things that are in this convention just to sort of, I almost said a bad word, sorry, just sort of to mess with the to mess with the system, to kind of slow things down, because they know that Hamilton is about to erupt. And believe me, in this 5.5-hour speech, he's going to erupt, and he is going to destroy his entire reputation as a military hero, as a scholar, as a lawyer, as an American. And after this point, he'll still accomplish a few things, but he's never seen as the same guy again.
That is, I get these guys were passionate, right? And they were boisterous at times.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the one old crap doing away with all the attaboys that he had. Is that what we're looking at here?
Pretty much, except that his one oh crap is the crap that you cannot say.
And we're back with that in moments on WMMB.
Call Bill now, 321-768-1240. Common Sense, Uncommon Radio.
And in our Tuesday 8 o'clock hour, Dave Bowman with us. Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live in an hour, brought to you by Gatto's Tire and Auto Service. Before we get back to it, head to the contest page at BillMick.com. Chance for you and a guest to join me at Premier Theaters at the Oaks, July 1st, 11 a.m. or closest thereto showing. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, what is likely the last iteration of Indiana Jones movies, at least with Harrison Ford in the lead. We're going to go out July 1st, 11 a.m.-ish. We'll give you 2 tickets, a couple of medium soft drinks, and a tub of popcorn to enjoy, and I look forward to seeing you there for the movie at Premier Theaters at the Oaks. So, Dave, Alexander Hamilton is about to give a speech, something he's certainly passionate about, and he's going to ruin himself in the process. Tell us what goes on.
Again, things I want you to keep in mind here. Whenever somebody says to you, we need to get back to the ideas and the values of the framers, always ask, which framer are you talking about? Because they didn't all agree. The thing about Hamilton's speech is we actually have his notes. They're in the archives. You can actually see them online. They're hard to read, but you can get them. And oddly enough, this part gets left out of the musical. It's they don't talk about this.
Okay, the musical was long enough as it was. We don't need 5 more hours added to it, right?
Right. But they could have made mention of the fact that he put his foot in his mouth. What Hamilton actually does here is he makes the mistake of actually saying out loud what he thinks. Now, you can argue that all you want, but in politics, there are certain things that even if you think them, you can't say them.
Or ways to say them if you do that may obscure the actual meaning.
It's not unusual. I mean, Hamilton was not alone in thinking that democracy was a bad idea. Most of the delegates there did think that. But he went on to say the following, let's say 4 things, okay? Number 1, he said it was better to give power to the rich and well-born, not to the mass of the people. Those are his words. He actually said that. He said the states are a useless, and he uses an old English word that I'm going to replace, but he said the states are a useless protuberance. They are an infection. They are a disease, and we need to get rid of the states and their governments and just have one big national government. Again, this is 1787. You could probably say that today, but you couldn't say that then. He said, quote, no good executive can be established on Republican principles, unquote. Now, he said that knowing full well that whatever government they decided on, the chief executive was going to be George Washington, and he knew that. But he said, you can't have a good executive department established on Republican principles. Yikes, because that sounds very royalish. And then he closed his speech by saying that the only good model of government in the entire world is the English model. And it's the best in the world, he said, and nothing short of that will work here. Now, combined all together, essentially what he was saying was, we need a royal government. Now, remember, he's Washington's best friend. As part of his speech, he calls for a lifetime appointment of the president. Now, his argument is that... He
said appointment, not election, right?
Right, exactly. Now, he argues that even a 4 or 6 year term president is going to act like a monarch anyway, so we might as well make him a monarch and have him for life. He calls for lifetime appointment of senators. For the governors of the states that kind of still remain as a rump thing, to be appointed by the federal government, not elected by the people of the states. And he closes out his remarks, as I said, by pointing out that Britain has the best government in the world. We should try that here. And the entire convention stares at him like, are you bleeping insane? The whole point of us being here is that we need to unite 13 sovereign governments into a power-sharing thing. And you're talking about after serving in an army that fought an 8-year war to get rid of a king, you're actually proposing that we have a king because you're going to be, the right-hand man of the king, as it were. And as one South Carolinian will say, Hamilton is praised by everybody in the country, but he is absolutely followed by no one because of this outrageous speech.
And we follow up with more in 60 seconds on Bill Mick Live. Dave Bowman and Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live as we wrap up our Tuesday together. So, Dave, he spends this 5 hours. He lays out, we need to go back to what we fought 8 years against. Let's do that. And only it's like the people screaming about communism, right? Our version will work because nobody's done it right yet. Is that what we're hearing?
In some ways, but he actually likes the British system, the British monarchical system. He just didn't like King George. And who knows? I mean, was he just being a troll? There are some people who think that he was just being outrageous so that the New Jersey plan would die, but the New Jersey plan was dead anyway. So he didn't really need to do that. But most of the people at the convention are put out by this. Madison is just absolutely furious about it. And he will give a speech on Thursday that just eviscerates Hamilton. Even Washington is kind of put out with him. And Hamilton gets so frustrated with the response to his speech, the lack of response, the lack of ability to control anything, that he actually leaves the convention. Now, Washington will later talk him into coming back, but for now, he's just useless. His reputation in the nation, when the people learn how he really feels about them, they never really put him back on the pedestal that he's put upon. Now, the thing is, he will go on, of course, to become, Secretary of Treasury under Washington. He will solve the nation's debt crisis, the first debt crisis, but he never, ever stops working to get rid of the states and to form a massive federal government, centralized government. And this is the Hamiltonian model of constitutional interpretation, whereas Jefferson initially went with, if it doesn't say you can do it, you cannot. Hamilton's model was always, if it doesn't say you can't, then you can. And you would have to say that the Hamiltonian model of interpretation is the one that won out. And it's why we have this massive federal government. So whenever you say, we want the values and ideas of the framers, well, depending on which one you want, you got Madison's. And I don't know that anybody would argue that our president acts like a monarch anyway.
In many cases, that's true. I want to take you back to something you said earlier, that Hamilton had wanted governors to be appointed by the federal government.
Yes.
Did he specifically lay out the kind of plan? Would it be with every administration? I get that he wanted the president for life, so that would be one thing. But take our two states, for example. Me in Florida, you in Washington. If I gave you a choice, would you take DeSantis or Inslee?
Well, I don't think that's much of a choice. I mean, I would take DeSantis, but yeah. Who would President Biden appoint?
Yeah, it would be Inslee.
Right. And so if the president's for life and the senators are for life, where's the accountability? And effectively they are now anyway. And that's part of the problem is, Madison ultimately won out, even though he hated democracy, the idea of democracy. I mean, people are arguing about whether we should take him off the $10 bill. He hated democracy. He hated your vote. So why not take him off the $10 bill?
So why are we handing people copies of him to vote the way we want him to? All right, let's get to the phones. Line 1, you're on Bill Mick Live with Dave Bowman.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Randy.
I guess the question I had was, did Hamilton agree with what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all that stuff ended up as? Are we really just kind of measuring his ideas and not measuring his conviction?
Ultimately, Hamilton would end up signing the Constitution, and he is the author of about 50 of the Federalist Papers. So you could argue that he becomes pro-constitutionalist, he becomes a Federalist. The question is his interpretation of what the Constitution means. And as we've talked about, he believed that if it doesn't say you can't do something, then you can, which of course leads to the government growing massively. And he certainly wanted the states to be subsumed by the federal government, even though, obviously the Constitution didn't call for that. If you read some of his Federalist Papers, he's very much in favor of the federal government because the states are incompetent, incapable, and he supports the representative element of this because he doesn't trust democracy. So I think it's a combination of both.
How many times have you or I, or maybe you and I, talked about the disengaged voter? Maybe he was right on that front, that it shouldn't be trusted to everybody because not everybody's engaged. Look how many people go vote now, Dave.
Well, the framers did not, as a general rule, trust democracy. Hamilton's mistake was he said it out loud, and that was, after the Revolutionary War, after Shays' Rebellion, that's just something that you can't say, because if you say it, then you're going to sound monarchical, and he did. The framers, the reason they went to a Republican form of government is because they knew that the people needed to be guided and they needed to be aided along the way. And representative government does the best form of that. And of course, in England, they have a constitutional monarchy in which they elect their representatives who suggest things to the king. well, would that have worked here? I don't know. But some days I think maybe it would have. Some days I think maybe it wouldn't have. But Hamilton really, really hurt his own reputation in the country by saying it out loud and by calling for essentially a monarch.
Line one, I was going to try to get you on with your question, but we don't have time in what's left of the hour because we're down to a minute. So when all's said and done, we see where we are today. Would you have given Hamilton any more of your ear than maybe these folks did, looking back on these 250 years of history, Dave?
Well, here's the thing. In 1787, 1788, the country needed Hamilton, because without his efforts, the Anti-Federalists may very well have won, and we wouldn't have had a constitution.
Very good. Dave Bowman, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you. It's interesting. Maybe we can do a musical about the speech.
Let's not.
Yeah, probably not. Gatto's Tire and Auto Service made the hour possible. You can pick up anything you missed in the podcast section at BillMick.com and the Bill Mick Live iHeartRadio channel. TheDaveBowmanShow.com for more of Dave Bowman. He's doing multiple podcasts a week, and you'll enjoy them. Tomorrow, a wide open Wednesday. We'll see you then.